Thanks for being here today. It's my privilege and pleasure to stand before you. I mean it when I say that. And I want to thank everybody who's watching online around the country and even around the world, as I learned last week when I received a text from someone in India thanking me for the message. Yeah. So thanks for being here. Just want to share with you something real quick. You have a handout, and on there are some important things going on in the life of the church. I invite you to check that out. One of which is the gatherings that take place here where people can connect with one another over common interest and so on. We have one on Thursdays. It meets at 7 o'clock where we talk about things like the hero's journey and different concepts that help us to go deeper. So we are in the third installment of this series called Heroes, and we've been taking a look at a concept known as the hero's journey, a narrative pattern, a set of recurring themes that we see in all of the world's great stories, something that is considered the greatest contribution of the famous mythologist Joseph Campbell's career. It's so highly valued among those in the writing world, those in Hollywood and such, that his works are required reading for many of them. Why? Well, it's because these writers realize that the hero's journey provides a framework that produces stories that connect very deeply with everyone. If you were to look up online right now, the best-selling books of all time, or the highest-grossing movies of all time, what you'll find there is that every single one of them follows the hero's motif, as Joseph Campbell has identified. So that's fine. It's important for authors and movie producers and the like. But we might ask ourselves, why does it matter for me? I mean, other than the value of great entertainment, how does it make our lives better? Well, you may have noticed that I've been very careful to never say that Joseph Campbell is the creator of the hero's journey, but only that he's identified it. And that should raise a question in our minds. Who wrote it? Who created the hero's journey? Well, the value that it holds lies in the fact that the hero's journey wasn't created by any one person. Instead, it was created by the collective experiences of billions of human souls throughout our history, living, trying to live as the hero in their own stories, whether they be kings, slaves, moms, dads, widows, orphans, but a desire to take the wisdom that they gained, all the treasures of that experience, the meaning and purpose of our human existence, to articulate those things and preserve them for their posterity, for us. I believe that the greatest hero's journey, the greatest story ever told, and the greatest hero is that of Jesus' story. And if you go back now and you read the Gospels or any of the other stories in the Bible, you'll see it. That story is following a trajectory, the hero's journey. And so when we understand this, we also understand that the hero's journey, this framework, can help us to better orient our lives in such a way that we're following Jesus, the ultimate hero, more closely. The fact is, all of these stories, every single great tale from every culture, is retelling variations of the same story. The human quest to understand God, the world that He made, who we are in it, and how we are to be in it. Its value lies in the fact that the hero's journey is our story. Last week we focused on Act 1 of 3. We learned some important things there. Life is dynamic and because it is dynamic, we will inevitably be called out or kicked out of our comfort zones. The difference that the hero makes is this. The hero has learned that life is meant to be an adventure. So the hero, with courage and joy, listens, doesn't avoid, he doesn't let himself be in the position where he's kicked out. He's listening, he's looking for the signs of the call, and he takes the call. The hero also is set apart because they also understand that the journey isn't to be made alone. We are designed to be interdependent. So the hero seeks out the wisdom of mentors and the companionship of loyal friends to take the journey with them. Today we're going to focus on Act 2. And this is what I hope is the takeaway from Act 2. An understanding that this is the place where the hero learns that the most difficult circumstances in their life, those times where they must cross into a place of which there is no return, the value of persevering through those times to derive something that they would otherwise never be able to take away as treasure. And that they have to persevere through those times in order to get the goal. And they learn that they're far more capable than they once thought. So it begins with step 1, the threshold. The adventure will eventually bring the hero, you'll notice this in all the stories that you love. Eventually, the adventure is going to take the hero to a place where they realize that their next step, if they cross this line, this threshold, they're going into a point of no return. They know this is their last chance to go back home the way that they came. One more step. There's no going back. And that leads me to the first truth I want to share with you. The hero chooses to cross the threshold, the point of no return. Last week we watched a clip from the movie The Hobbit, where the hero Bilbo Baggins decides to leave his cozy hobbit hole and take off on an adventure with some wild dwarves and a wandering wizard to steal back a treasure that was lost long ago to the dragon Smaug. Right now we're going to watch another clip from that movie, and we're going to see Bilbo Baggins crossing the threshold. Let's watch it together.
Hello. He's not at home. Not at home. Good. Good.
My teeth are swords. My claws are spears. My wings are a hurricane. I think our little game ends here. So tell me, thief, how do you choose to die?
If you haven't seen the movie, you got to go and see it. You got to rent it. So Bilbo, I said, crosses the threshold. Well, he does this when he decides to actually go down into this vast treasure chamber All the while knowing that somewhere in the darkness, the dragon lives. He's drawn at first by the allure of the gold. He's drawn by his commitment to the dwarves to find a particularly valuable relic that they were after called the Arkenstone. He goes in, but the dragon awakes. And Smaug is presented as this all but invincible enemy. His enormity, his power is sharply contrasted, you'll notice, with Bilbo's smallness and powerlessness. The dragon is the classic symbol for chaos in the world's mythologies. In fact, the dragon has made its way into the stories of every single culture without exception. Every single culture that's ever been studied, there is the story of the dragon. So it's become a universal symbol for our greatest fears, for those times that are overwhelming and seem impossible to get past, the symbol of our inevitable death. The Bible tells us that Jesus, the ultimate hero, came face to face with his own dragons. His ministry on earth was only a short 3 years. But the impact of that ministry was such that the religious and political leaders of the day had become very threatened by the potential loss of their power because of the movement that he had started, and they were willing to stop that movement with whatever means necessary. Jesus could see the handwriting on the wall. He knew that he was at a threshold. If he were to go to Jerusalem again, he had crossed the line from which there is no returning. In his case, he was facing his actual death. He knew it. He used this time as a teachable moment for his disciples, talking with them about the future that he saw ahead of them, and teaching them why he had to cross the threshold. He said, "Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No. It was for this very reason I came to this hour." Jesus is the hero that we say we should be modeling our life after, the ultimate example of what it means to take the journey as the hero, the ultimate example of virtue, of strength, courage. But Jesus knew what he was heading for. He was staring down the barrel of his own demise. He knew that to take that step was going to be painful. Reminds me of a story of my own. In my early days in youth ministry, I was being groomed to replace the existing youth pastor. His name was Dave. This produced all kinds of anxiety for me. Dave was a natural with the kids. He connected with all of them in some way. He was a cut-up, a jokester, that sort of thing, but he was also an athlete. And so we had a lot of kids that had gravitated to the group that were athletes, and I am not an athlete. In fact, I thought about this before I came out. I don't even know who's playing today. It's true, I don't. So anyway, this was all very intimidating to me. How am I going to win the respect of these kids who I see have so much respect for Dave, and he and I are so different? How is this going to work out? Well, that summer we decided to take the kids up to North Georgia and rent a group cabin in the mountains there. Dave had kids there before, so he knew that there was this great hill right next to the cabin, and that it would make a perfect slip and slide. A giant slip and slide. He didn't let them know. He hid the giant roll of Visqueen and a gallon of liquid soap and the long hose in a crate that they couldn't see in. When he took that out on a particular day, the kids saw what was going to happen, and they were thrilled. So they ran off into the cabin. They got their swimsuits on, didn't even have to tell them. And I just kind of slowly made my way to do the same. So they all lined up, very eager to launch themselves down this slide that looked like certain death to me. So I acted like I was being courteous and let all the kids get in line before me, you know. But really what I was doing is I was sizing up the whole thing and watching especially the athletes and how they took this thing on. So being the kid that always rode the brakes all the way down the hill, I was afraid of this hill. This was steep, man. I didn't want to do this. So I'm psyching myself up watching these kids, and people are trying to talk to me, and I'm hearing half of what they're saying because I'm so worried about it. Finally, it gets to my turn, and I've psyched myself up enough that I'm going to launch, and I'm going to go as fast as I can and launch myself as high as I can. So I did. I was running. I was picking up speed. I got to the line. I launched myself in the air as high as I could, and in the middle of the air, I realized I was about to experience something that most people would never experience in their whole life. I was about to experience what it's like to do a belly flop on dry land. Instead of speeding down the hill, I slid like this. My last thought before I hit the ground, this is going to be painful. Leads me to the second point. The hero reflects on the pain of the journey. So there are many occasions on the journey, all of you know this, where we are faced with circumstances or faced by people where we have to deal with adversity, challenges that stretch us. It could be enemies. It could be friends, like the trusted friend who says things that you don't really want to hear. All of it shapes us into who we are becoming. But there is nothing gained like those treasures gained through the inflicted pain of those who want to crush us, whose intentions are not good. In a recent argument with my son, Ben, he told me about something that had happened at work. I was driving him home, and then he told me how he responded to the boss over it. And I didn't really approve of the way that he interacted with his boss. So I said, this is the way I think that Jesus would have handled that situation. And he stopped me. He said, I don't care, Dad. I don't care about God. You know why I don't care about God? Because every time I go to talk with you about any of this, it always ends up with a lesson on how Jesus would have done it. So I don't want to hear it. As a pastor, there was little else that Ben could have said that would hurt as much as this hurt. But it took Ben saying these hurtful things and his frustration to show me something very valuable. That sometimes he didn't need more lessons from a pastor as much as he needed a dad who would simply listen. See, that's the treasure. In that particular circumstance, that was the treasure. Was it an unwanted gift? Yeah, it was. It hurt, but it was still a gift. I learned what I needed to do to be a better dad to my son. A friend shared a recent argument that he had with his ex. And he said, you know, she's just so good at laying out my shortcomings. It's like a machine gun. I can't even get my head above the water. It's just like coming at me so fast. I don't know what to say. But let me list some for you. So he did. He said, so at least some of those criticisms, they're untrue, right? I said, I think so. I wasn't your wife, but as far as what I know, yeah, some of them are untrue. But I think the hero would ask a better, more important question when he faces his enemy. How many of those criticisms are true? Was I really so selfish that I only tried to love her with the love language I understood? Never stopping to consider the language that she needed to hear love through? Did I neglect the relationship? What's the baggage that I need to leave behind so I don't carry it into the next? See, this is the time that the hero has to sift through the pain in order to find the truths that lay among the lies. Sometimes during the process, we die a little. But that's what crossing the threshold is for. We know there's going to be pain. But what we need to understand is that there's treasure there to be gained. We all experience these death moments, coming to grips with an ego that you need to let die. Seeing your child in a vulnerable moment, expressing the truth that you haven't been the parent that you need to be. We could let the pain convince us that it's all lies, but that's really what the villain does. He gets bitter over it. The hero doesn't do this. The hero stays in the fight, endures the pain, and examines it very closely to find those truths that can only be found in the places and with the people whose intention is to crush us. An unwanted gift, but a gift nonetheless. That leads me to this last point. The hero perseveres through the pain because this is where the real treasures lie, the qualities and actions of a better, stronger me. Jesus was willing to embrace the pain. He was willing to embrace death because he also knew that it had the potential to spark a movement that would change the world. The hero is always looking at the hope beyond, something bigger than himself to play his role in. In my own story, it was later revealed by the doctor that I had hairline fractures throughout my rib cage. And so, by the time I had reached the descent to the bottom of the hill, I was in physical agony and my ego was severely crushed. I thought to myself, how are these kids going to see me as anything other than a clown to be laughed at, much less respect me? And so despite the pain, I decided I'm going to go for a second attempt. So I ran up the hill, got in line. When it was my turn, I ran as fast as I could, and I launched myself even further into the air. And this time, I belly flopped again. Yeah. But I gained something out of this turn. This time, the descent brought the real treasure. I realized that I had to stop letting my fears, my insecurities dictate who I should become. I realized instead I should be focusing on who I was and the things that would genuinely make me the hero that only I could be. In 15 years of youth ministry, I forged relationships by that value, where that I would be respected by respecting myself enough to present the best person that I could be as much as possible, someone they respected as myself. What is the cave that you fear to enter? Take heart. There's treasure in there. Let's pray together. Father, we've been thanking you in this series for the journey. Up to this point, a journey that has been quite uncomfortable, facing the unknown. Today, crossing thresholds where we know there's going to be pain. So grant us courage, Lord. Help us to remember, to sense that you're always present, to go through it all with us, that we may more consistently emerge as the hero with treasure to share. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. If you'll stand, I'll share a story with you in closing. And also remind you that if you have anything you need to pray with someone about, there are fine people up here that are willing to pray with you. Also that there is communion being served after service if you'd like to join. Last week I shared with you the fears that I faced around adopting another child. And how when I had faced those fears, I heard the Lord saying to me, I heard him say, you don't have to be afraid. I'm just coming to live with you in ways that you haven't experienced yet. But it's still me. What I didn't realize at that point, and really not until we met Joseph, was that knowing God through Joseph was going to be painful. In fact, in some ways, hellish, especially in those first couple of years. During that time, we had some of our worst qualities dragged out into the light, but also some of our best qualities forged in the fires of that hell. Joseph was a troubled little soul who had experienced trauma in his life, the likes of which I had not seen in my worst nightmares. And I'm not exaggerating that for the sake of the story. It's true. We realized, well, we took the call, but now we've crossed a threshold from which there's no return. He had encountered these traumas and moreover had no way, because of his language disabilities, to articulate his story, to bring some order to his chaos, much less find the meaning, the treasures of purpose in that story. So, what were we to do with this little boy that was kind of like a trapped badger in a cage? His chaos was now our chaos. There's no going back. And it threatened to destroy us. I realized that if God had come to live with me in ways that I hadn't known, well, now he was living with me as chaos incarnate. I had responded to the call, and now there was no going back. What could I contribute? I knew the value of stories. I knew that he needed a story, and so I tried my best to role play with him in a story that involved his, maybe you've heard this before, I've shared it a while ago, his two favorite teddy bears, Tiny and Cupcake. And so we role played through various adventures over the years. And many of those adventures took place in a realm that's very similar to the one that he had to live in now, this strange new world where he had left behind all that he had ever known and the people he had grown to love. But we also realized that we needed to reach out to counselors, psychologists, friends in the adoptive community, read good books, ask them to mentor us and be our companions on this journey. And we're so indebted to all of them. Some of you are in this room. Well, as he's gotten older, Joseph engages with Tiny and Cupcake less and less. Very occasionally, he'll bring them up. But he's learned a lot. On Monday morning, I was taking him to school, and he recounted a story from the day before at church, where he had been playing with one of the younger boys, and something happened where the younger boy snickered at him and said, "You're stupid." And the kid didn't mean anything by it. But because Joseph is aware of his disabilities, it hurt. But he wanted me to know how he responded like Cupcake, the wise mentor in his old stories, would have responded. He said this, "Well, you may be smarter than me, but I'm older than you, and you should respect your elders. I'm a nice person." Yeah. "And I'm a good friend, and I don't say mean things to my friends. I respect them. So if you want to be my friend, then respect me. And if you don't want to, I will respect me. I'll find someone else to play with." Yeah. So Joseph has learned a lot about being a hero. Where are you? Is there a threshold that you're about to cross, but you're afraid of the pain that you know is inevitable? Are you willing to face it? Reflect on the pain. Examine it and take hold of the treasures of your potential. That's the challenge. But take heart. Just as Joseph Campbell said, the cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. So go in his peace today, encouraged on the journey to take hold of that for which Christ has taken hold of you. God bless you. Thanks for being here today.